So I highly recommend that you Google and look up the Ken Burns directed, PBS produced uh, The American Civil War. It's a 9-hour documentary that documents the American Civil War historically, factually, and just as it happened, without political opinion, which is something that I've realized that you've got like two generations of Americans underneath me that did not experience 9/11. They were not old enough yet to experience 9/11. And now they're voting, and this is scary, very scary. These generations have never, ever experienced non-opinion history because they get opinions shoved down their throat. So I highly recommend the Ken Burns documentary. It's a good one. It's I consider it neither for or against the North or the South. Just a documentary that documents what happened, and that's what documentaries used to be before the whole the need to push an agenda, the need to push a narrative, like what Super Size Me and stuff like that. Anyway, so some Civil War facts that will soon be just absolutely illegal. They don't talk about these simple Civil War facts in school, but you can easily search these out if you are so inclined. Civil War fact, just off the top of my head, number one: Abraham Lincoln suspended habeas corpus, which was your right to due process. Civil War fact number two: his Chief of Justice, Abraham Lincoln's Chief of Justice, told him that suspending habeas corpus was illegal and was against the Constitution. And Abraham Lincoln told him, "I'm going to have you hung by the neck outside the Capitol building as an example to others who would defy me." But Abraham Lincoln is the good guy. Okay. Civil War fact number three: when it was announced that the Civil War was going to happen, and we're going to get to that. When it was announced the Civil War was going to happen, there was this town of freed slaves in Alabama that they were free, they had their own town, they had children, those children were growing up. And when they heard that the Civil War was happening, they produced their own regiment. They made their own uniforms. They got what rusted, used muskets that they could find. They had muskets actually from the Revolutionary War. They were that old and they were passed down that long. And they were ready to go fight some Yankees. They were all black. They were free, and they were ready to go fight some Yankees. They don't talk about the free black Southerners that were absolute heroes in the war anymore. They just never talk about that. So like what are we on? Civil War fact number 4. There were 3 major Native American tribes in the state of Alabama that was left, and it's really important to point out that there were Native American tribes in America, and especially in Alabama, that did some things that were considered horrific, such as throwing their children into the river and watching them drown, and they called that testing them, teaching them how to swim. Like if 3 babies die, but the 4th one learns how to swim and survives, they kept that 4th one. And they thought that living that way was good. And when the British colonialists came into Alabama, they told them, you can't do that anymore. Your entire way of life has to stop. That's not allowed. So that was a product of colonization, was also raising up moral and ethical standards on really, really barbaric traditions that existed here in Native America. And at the French and Indian War, if you know anything about the French and Indian War, the Native Americans killed each other way more than white man has ever killed Native Americans. The Native Americans really like to kill each other and go to war with each other. It was their national pastime. We have the NFL where we pretend to go to war with each other and we satiate that craving. they would actually go to war with each other and kill each other, just consistently. What are we on? Civil War. I mean, I'm just spitballing here. Civil War fact number 5. Sherman's March to the Sea was just an absolute cultural genocide and an economic, absolute just economic total devastation. He completely erased the Southern economy. He burned so many plantations and cotton producing areas, iron mills, ports, entire ports, like where ships were coming and going. They burned all of that. They destroyed so much. And there's people that say I'm lying, but if I'm lying, then how come the federal government recognized that, and then they promised that they would rebuild the South and give the South reparations for the damages of the Civil War? The federal government promised that, and then they never really did it. I think they did just a few things like, interstate funding and stuff like that, but don't we all get that? There's just so many things about the Civil War that they never talk about. And anyway, the 3 Native American tribes that were here in Alabama, they fought for the Confederacy. And they fought to the death. And that's the reason why you don't really have Native American tribes, big established Native American tribes here in Alabama, because the last 3 major ones basically fought to the death on the side of the Confederacy. And since the North saw them as less than human, I mean, they were all hunted down by the Union. Here's another Civil War fact. This is a fun one. You're not going to find a Confederate that fought for the South that was tried for treason. You're not going to find one. The reason why is because the Confederates were doing what was absolutely in their legal right according to our system, according to our republic. The states existed before the republic. So the states, in theory, should be able to declare autonomy and say we are withdrawing from the republic. Now, the republic does not want you to know that. So the republic is going to pay, with federal funding, your tax dollars, school systems. They're going to pay school systems to not tell people that. It's just like jury nullification. Liberals know what jury nullification is. Google it. It's a thing. The government doesn't want you to know that it exists, but it absolutely exists. Jury nullification is when a jury just, they know that like let's say that a father killed a pedophile. He walks in and pedophile's doing something to his kids, and the father kills the pedophile. A jury nullification could be a jury going, yeah, we find him not guilty. And the judge would be like, are you sure? And the lawyers would be like, are you kidding me? We obviously have all of this evidence that we did it. He even says that he did it, blah, 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 blah. And the jury can just be like, yeah, he didn't do it. That's called jury nullification. The government doesn't want you to know that exists. Anyway, I went off on a little side tangent. Anyway, there's so many things about the Civil War. I feel like I could teach a class on this subject, because they don't actually teach the Civil War anymore. First 4 years of the Civil War, the South was winning pretty well. They were losing men. It was devastating to their numbers, but they were absolutely kicking butt, taking names, and just absolutely destroying and pushing back any Union presence in the South, particularly along Tennessee and Virginia. That's the reason why, Lee went all the way up into Maryland. Like, what are you doing up there? Get back down. You're supposed to... Oh, that brings me to the next Civil War fact. What are we on? 7, 8, whatever. Lee never invaded the Union, ever. Lee was not fighting an offensive war. Lee said that he just had a defensive army to stop northern invasion into the South. He had no plans and never had any plans to attack Washington, D.C. or unseat the Uncle Sam or the federal government. It's just the federal government would just keep going on without the Confederate States. It was a defensive thing. Oh, the next Civil War fact. Lincoln announced that he was going to invade the South, that he was raising an army, he was funding the army, and he was going to send them in there. So, in response, the South, Robert E. Lee, raised a citizen army. These were fathers and sons, brothers, that would drop what they were doing at the family farm and the homestead, and they would, most of them did not have shoes. The Confederate Army was famous for not having shoes. They couldn't afford shoes. We're poor Southerners. I remember the first time I saw a pair of like Nikes for like $100. I about passed out. Like, what are you people doing? We're Southerners. We don't spend money on shoes. Anyway, you don't need shoes. Anyway, what does that bring me to? It's like Civil War fact number 9, I think. I got a burger. Civil War fact number 9. Civil War fact number 9. Like, if Lee had lived and not accidentally been shot at night by his own men because he ordered his men to advance forward and shoot anything that moved, and then he accidentally got in front of them, if Lee had survived, the South had a really, really good chance of winning the war. Lee would have been at Gettysburg, would have put his forces to the South, which would have divided the North. Lee would have probably been in command of that famous, the regiment that got defeated at the hill in Gettysburg. He probably would have been commanding them, and they would have never made that charge. It was really dumb. You don't charge uphill at the enemy when they're shooting down at you. Just don't do that. That's how you lose. Anyway, if Lee had survived, he would have been at Chattanooga. Gettysburg would have been different. It would have probably been a split decision, a hold off for 3 days. There would have been massive loss, but then the armies would have broke off. Chattanooga would have still happened. Lee would have been there, and it would have been a different story. Anyway, they don't really teach Southern history anymore, or Southern culture. They don't teach it. They don't practice it. There's just this need in society to say that Southerners are evil. No, it's just not true. You know, people that were fighting. Oh, this brings me to, the last Civil War fact. The people, 99.999% of the people that were fighting for the Confederacy, for the South, did not own slaves, did not have any desire to own slaves. They didn't care about slavery. It was an independence thing. But if they teach you that in high school, you'll think for yourself, and when you get older, you'll start to think, is my state healthier and better off with Uncle Sam on its back? Is it? Did you know that every single state in the Union is forced to run a surplus in their budget? They cannot run a deficit. They're not allowed to run a deficit. Uncle Sam will come down on them hard if they... you can't even announce that you have a deficit. You have to balance your budget, right? The federal government enforces this law, this rule. Each state must balance their budget every single year. The federal government, however, can borrow $25 trillion from your future work. They're borrowing $25 trillion from you, from the work you're going to do in the future, which means they're borrowing money that's going to cover all of the work that you're going to do in the future, all of the work your kids are going to do in the future. And then they put it on the credit card. They borrow even more money. They borrow $90 trillion, and now they're borrowing from work that your great-grandkids are going to be doing, and your great-grandkids don't even exist yet. They are making money out of thin air. And the way that they do it and the way that they remain solvent is they force every single state all 50 of them, to balance their yearly budget and to run a surplus and to not be in debt. They have to either be balanced at zero or a surplus. They cannot be in debt. But the federal government, which taxes all the states and everything that the states does, can just borrow as much money from our country's future labor as they see fit with the stroke of a pen. My ancestors thought that that was ridiculous. That basically meant that they were a word that starts with an S.